What's up, guys? It's Jerry Miller. Welcome to the I Love CVille Show. It's great to be with you on a Monday. Thank you kindly for joining us this afternoon. Hope the weekend treated you well. Very excited for today's program. Scott Beyer is in the house, born and raised in Charlottesville, product of the Covenant School, now a man that truly understands media and the way to pivot and leverage media in today's 2019 world where these are ubiquitous, where social media is essentially a publisher, something we are doing here at I Love CVille. We'll welcome Scott Beyer to the program in a matter of moments. I want to pick his very large brain and intellect and discuss zoning, neighborhoods around Charlottesville, new development around Charlottesville, how Charlottesville's popularity is potentially squeezing out the lower and middle class from living in city limits. A lot of topics we will cover with Scott Beyer in a matter of moments. I'd like to thank some of the sponsors that make the program possible. We'll give some love to one of our favorite clients. We are an advertising agency, and one of the brands that we manage very closely and very loyally is Intrastate Pest and Service Companies. This business guy started in 1969 with the first generation. His name, Mr. Wells. He had a truck, sweat equity, and a dream to build a company. He would go to his first home in 1969, service it successfully, then find the closest payphone where he would call his next customer and say, "May I come to your house today?" Today, Intrastate Pest and Service Companies, a 4-generation strong business, almost 100 employees in a Commonwealth-wide footprint, and we salute them for that. We also want to give some props to Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Chiropractic and Sports Medicine, physical therapy, sports medicine, and chiropractic care. Dr. Wagner and his team of associates are changing people's lives. Harris Tolber is our director. Judah Wickhauer and Lauren Linsky, part of the program, as producers. Harris, my friend, we cannot do this without you. If you could, sir, go to the studio camera and welcome our esteemed guests to the show. Scott Beyer, hello. Thank you kindly for joining us.
Hi, Jerry. How's it going?
It's going well. You got a lot of folks watching. Welcome Meg, Elizabeth Welch, Nikki Wooten-Chambliss, folks at the Covenant School, Carol Schwab-Barnett. We will get to everybody. Bud Bryant is watching as well. My friend, introduce yourself to the public.
Sure thing. My name is Scott Beyer, and for the CVille public, I am a CVille resident, born and raised, and currently living here. And I am some combination of a journalist. I write for Forbes magazine, Governing magazine, and various other publications. I am also a media entrepreneur. I own the Market Urbanism Report, which is a media company that is designed to bring free market policy into cities. And last but not least, I'm in the process of launching an urban consultancy, a consulting practice to try to bring better urban policy into cities.
I love it. I love the entrepreneurial side. I love the media side. My first job out of the University of Virginia was as a staff writer at the Daily Progress. Climbed the ladder to the youngest editor in the history of the newspaper, parlayed that position into a syndicated radio show in 3 states on 7 affiliates with ESPN, and then leveraged that into 2 television shows that bear my name with NBC 29. Where I'm going with this, I love media. Yeah. I love holding newspapers still. I love listening to talk radio. I love consuming media in so many different forms. I'm going to give you some props. You understand the changing landscape of media very well. You're extremely active on Twitter. You got a Facebook group. You got a Facebook page. You put content out routinely. I love what you were doing with Instagram, where you were writing, say, my first job, say 16, 17 inches of copy. That's in the newspaper.
Yeah.
But you're putting it on Instagram.
Uh-huh.
I especially loved your little vignette that you did about the epicenter that is Charlottesville and how you could walk to numerous hubs or dining districts.
Sure.
Love the engagement you're getting on social. Just throw that to you. Your passions for media in general.
Well, likewise, I want to return the compliment to you. I mean, I think we recognize this in each other because I'm looking at your branding for I Love CVille and the various different companies that you have, and it seems very on point, well-designed, visually pleasing, active, and I think that's the future of media. I was just discussing the other day how outdated actually that I think some old media concepts are. For example, the physical publication of books. I think that industry is a little bit behind on some things, and whereas there is a new crop of marketers and communicators who understand that things like graphic design, visual branding, social media, and those various things are actually the way you get messages out in 2019. So yeah, we're seeing eye to eye.
I think with what you're doing, I'm passionate about real estate, just like you. Why don't we take an opportunity to introduce to the public Market Urbanism Report, please?
Sure. So Market Urbanism Report is a media company that is designed to bring free market policies into cities. So I launched it in 2017, and I've raised some money for it. The business model really is, it's more like a nonprofit model in the sense that it depends on donations. And so I've raised about $80,000 for it, but I'm still very early in the process. But the point of the company is to advocate for free market urban policy. So we have a blog and a monthly podcast, and also, as you were talking about before, a number of very active social media threads that pump out the content on the daily basis and have quite entertaining threads. So if you like entertainment and you like urban issues combined, you definitely want to follow those.
I love it. I love it. John Updike from Roy Wheeler Realty Company is watching. John Craig, co-owner of CVille Hop on Tours. He's also an agent with Keller Williams watching. Aaron King, an entrepreneur in the hospitality and food and beverage space watching. Hello, James Watson. Give it a like, give it a share. Guys, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. We're going to leverage this man's beautiful intellect and brain power, and we're going to do it at a micro level here in the city of Charlottesville, which is where he was raised and born. Let's get straight into it.
Okay.
10.27 square mile city.
Uh-huh.
There is not much land left in the city of Charlottesville
Nope.
from a developmental standpoint. We can go up, which we're seeing along West Main. Let's just talk about open-ended, and then I'll get into specifics. The struggles of a 10.27 square mile city that is at land capacity. Throw that to you.
Well, it's all relative. I mean, I think it's at land capacity, but is it at peak capacity density? I would say absolutely not. There are all kinds of cities around the globe. You can look at Asian cities specifically that are very dense. A lot of European cities have that were built before the automobile have much more of a walkability factor because they were built at a time when people had to walk to what they needed to buy and work and day-to-day things. So they were built in a very dense fashion. Charlottesville, like the United States at large, was built around the automobile. So we have a very sprawling, almost suburban aspect to our city. And I think the answer to the issue you're talking about of having a very small square mileage city is we need to rezone the city so that we have more density on any given land plot. And then we're not going to have some of the affordable housing issues that we have as far as, home prices are increasing here and we have a purported housing shortage. And the way we address that shortage is by rezoning the land.
More than half of the land in the city of Charlottesville is zoned R1, single-family detached homes.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, the antithesis to density and to approachability and to accommodating folks.
Yeah.
Throw that to you. So you see the conundrum being potentially solved in its first stage, or it's in its infancy, by revamping the zoning away from this R1 heavy to something that's more inclusive to density.
Yeah, there's another word for R1 that gets circulated on Twitter a lot, and that is exclusionary zoning. And it's exclusionary because you're basically saying we have a large plot of land, and in Charlottesville, land is very expensive, and you can only put one home on it. Now that necessarily excludes a large group of people who can't afford to buy that entire piece of land and just put one home on it. My premise is that if we subdivide that land to allow more units by zoning up from R1 to a more incremental level of density, maybe a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex, then we're allowing 4 families to live on that plot of land rather than 1.
We have planning commissioners in both the city of Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and Fluvanna County watching the program right now. The zoning in Charlottesville has forever been a struggle. In a lot of ways, the city of Charlottesville was losing a lot of its population to the suburbs. And it was losing its population to the suburbs because folks were able, as you know, to get larger plots of land and build McMansions at potentially a more affordable rate. When that happened, and I'll cut straight to the chase, the city put some, which we now reflect in as potentially racist zoning in place to prevent white flight from the city to the county, and that's when we saw a lot of the R1 zoning really made a priority.
Right.
Now, with the benefit of hindsight and perspective, this didn't seem to be the right move, and it's certainly something that's keeping, the lower middle class from potentially having housing in Charlottesville, and B, I'll cut straight to the chase, a lot of our African American community, a lot of our Latin American community from having the housing they need in the city of Charlottesville.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on when you say R1 zoning was designed to bring a suburbanized idyllic model into a city. So you might look at Fry Springs or Belmont and the way it's zoned as an example of, at one point those were suburbs, they eventually got annexed, but they very much personify the attempt by the city to have an idyllic suburban model in a city. And maybe that made sense in 1970, 1980, when as you said, a lot of the white flight was leaving Charlottesville, but it's highly out of date now because Charlottesville is a much more in-demand city, and it obviously has elevated housing prices. So yes, to your point, if you only have R1 zoning in extremely hot urban areas, the lower income minority population, or just the working class in general of any race, is not going to be able to afford it. And so I think what you see a lot now is you see very minimal growth in the city of Charlottesville. You see relatively minimal growth. Also, I want to talk about Albemarle County because there's a lot of restrictive zoning in Albemarle County as well. And so you see the working class locating in Fluvanna, Louisa, Greene, having to commute in to the city of Charlottesville, 30, 40, 50-minute commutes, putting a lot of wear and tear on the roads and putting a lot of wear and tear on their household budget. And those are the people that cannot afford to live in Charlottesville and Albemarle because of our policies.
Ivan Ramos, welcome to the program. He's giving you some props right now. I believe he's watching in the Big Apple in New York City. Give it a like and give it a share on any of the channels that you're watching. Let's just get into it. Let's two dudes at a bar or a barbershop just talking about our passions here.
Yeah.
I look at West Main, man, and I went to UVA. I remember when I went to UVA, we didn't cross 14th Street.
Sure.
And there was trepidation as students. If we crossed 14th Street, we went from being in the UVA bubble to being in an area that was unsafe or dangerous or where the townies were.
People used to get mugged.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it was a little shade. It's changed big time. Now I look at a place that I love that's near and dear to my heart, Pelton Station, which I believe is on 10th Street in the old classic car spot. That whole area, the 10th and Page neighborhood, has come so far in such a short period of time. You look at West Main, and you have towers of apartments that are monopolizing the skyline and engulfing public housing like West Haven, where a lot of the folks that are tied to the West Haven community or advocates of West Haven, they're concerned that eventually they will be pushed out because of developers wanting to build these towers around West Main and the city of Charlottesville to accommodate more density.
Right.
And let's cut to the chase to make money. Because those towers are clocking, a studio's probably renting for $1,500, $1,600, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, more than that. Where I'm going with this is, if we need to build up and we need to create more density to accommodate the demand, do we have concern of what that's going to do to existing neighborhoods and folks that are perhaps tied to public housing?
Yes, and I think, here's the problem with our zoning. And I can understand the frustrations actually in the black community because their neighborhoods very frequently get rezoned and retargeted for more development. The white neighborhoods in Charlottesville, the aforementioned ones that we were talking about that are zoned R1.
North downtown.
Do not. North downtown, Fry Springs, basically much of the northern half of the city. My whole thing with like the gentrification problem that you're talking about is because we only rezone in very specific parts of the city and we don't rezone the entire city, it means that the land values and the density the land values inflate in specific areas and cause gentrification in specific areas. And my whole thing is that, say in the upcoming comp plan, if we rezone the entire city, it brings much more equilibrium and equity throughout the entire process. You're gradually increasing the value of the land all throughout the city. You're not hyperinflating very specific parts that have been rezoned. And so, I mean, you look at a place like Cherry Avenue, 10th and Page, Venable, historically black communities in a lot of cases, and they have seen hyperinflation of their land values and have been, in many cases,
priced out
as a result.
Yeah. And I think and I'm very trepid that is exactly what's going to happen to Cherry Avenue into Fifeville. Into the Orangedale neighborhood.
To the extent it's not already.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the first spot I lived when I got out of UVA and out of the bubble was on Little Graves in Belmont behind Spud Nuts. And this was circa 2005. And in 2005, Belmont was not nearly as gentrified, as yuppied, and as white collar and as business professional it is now. And I remember in Little Graves, and me and my buddies rented a $1,000 a month home. It was a dump. Okay. 4 of us lived there. There were 3 bedrooms. One of my buddies literally climbed a rope ladder to the attic that he made a ramshackle bedroom, and we shared the $1,000 rent 4 ways instead of 3 ways because we were broke, and all we cared about was stumbling to and from the bars and meeting women. And Little Graves was close to the downtown mall. So where I'm going with this is I remember Belmont, Scott, in 2005, when down the road on Little Graves was a guy that was like 3rd generation Belmontonian. And he was like as blue collar as it got. Okay, I'm talking like a painter, kind of like a jack of all trades profession. And he'd have me over to his ramshackle garage where he had a pool table, and we'd drink Budweisers. And then slowly over an 18-month period of time of living on Little Graves, before I bought my first place, I started seeing $300,000, $400,000 homes come in.
Right.
Either torn down or built from scratch or remodeled altogether. And that created a trickle over value, increased value to other homes next to it. Next thing, tax assessments go up. And then next thing you know, that 3rd generation Belmontonian, I see him moving out. I come over for a Budweiser, and I said to him, "Why are you moving out, Tony?" He goes, "You know what my taxes are now? I can't afford it. I'm going to sell my home, and I'm going to move to Fluvanna."
And that's an argument for limiting property taxes, because property taxes, when they can be increased ad infinitum, a lot of times people get priced out if they're living in gentrified neighborhoods. I do want to point out another aspect of real estate that I think would apply to that conversation, though. You were talking about the high-rise density along West Main. I still find those buildings very useful in a lot of ways because it creates a containment area per se that the students can live in, and so they don't infiltrate the old single-family neighborhoods. I mean, I think if you had gone to UVA at a point when we had those buildings, you may not have had to cram up 4 students to a house in Belmont. And so I think
you're totally right.
You know, when you don't have those high-end condos, basically students go in, a large number of students go in, they subdivide a small home, they have more revenue and they have disposable income that they can spend to rent out that house compared to an old working class family. So I mean, the condos are definitely important.
Ivan Ramos says, "Guys, I'm in Western New York right now, the Flower City. I'm enjoying the conversation." Bruno Showers giving you some props right now. Give it a like, give it a share on any of the streams that you're watching. If you got a comment for Scott, put it in the stream here. Let me throw this to you. I look at what UVA's role is in the community, and as I spend more time in the community, as I have my son and want to do well by him, it's changed my perspective. President Jim Ryan recently put this out there that UVA is considering housing second years on grounds, making a requirement for first years and second years to be tied to University of Virginia housing. The impact that this could have on the community is going to be significant. It's going to open up a lot more housing potentially for lower wage folks to live in the city of Charlottesville. Because you have, whether it's a couple thousand second years, not living in, like, say, Oxford Hills.
The neighborhoods,
The neighborhood. Throw that to you.
Well, I'd say it's good. I mean, one thing about that, though, is UVA's land is not taxed. So, I mean, there's a little bit, the city is losing revenue. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, there's kind of a reactionary mindset. I think people look at UVA and say, oh, well, they should build their own housing on their own grounds. I would actually say it would actually be better if the city just allowed more housing to be built in its boundaries so that UVA students didn't necessarily have to live on grounds. They could live in the city of Charlottesville, and we would collect those property taxes. But I mean, overall, it's a good thing that UVA would build more housing, and I guess that's what they would have to do, right? If that mandate were to be in place.
I'm torn on this. I'm a conscious capitalist or a social entrepreneur. I believe in running a business in the black and focusing on profits, but doing it in a way where I'm leaving my footprint in a better place than when I first arrived in the city of Charlottesville. That's a social entrepreneur or a conscious capitalist.
Sure.
The businessman in me says, if I'm a landlord, I have 24 tenants. Okay, so the businessman in me is potentially terrified that the number one behemoth in our community, the University of Virginia, is potentially taking 4,000 or say it's 2,000 or 3,000 students out of the marketplace.
Sure.
And certainly going to impact a supply and demand from a landlord standpoint. The conscious capitalist in me or the social entrepreneur in me says this is great, because it's unfair that our teachers and our policemen and our EMTs cannot afford to live in the city of Charlottesville when they're working in the city of Charlottesville, the epicenter of employment. Scott Beyer, jump in here.
I say go with your conscious capitalist.
Okay.
Because, yeah, you bring up a great point. I think when any city, Charlottesville or others, limits the supply of housing, it ends up helping the existing landlords. It inflates the
Talk to us about
the
that.
value of their property. Because you're reducing the natural competition that comes from having new housing. So another big aspect of that is homeowners. A lot of reason that homeowners end up opposing new development is because they know that it increases the value of their own property and the resale value of their home. So, I mean, yeah, it's all about competition. It's about allowing more development to suppress the price inflation that exists all across the market.
I see that firsthand. So I own a 1993 3,000 square foot home, 4-bedroom, 4-bath on a half-acre in Albemarle County in Redfields. Hot spot of town where Wegmans and Fifth Street Station is. However, I'm seeing the Redfields neighborhood, which is right around the corner from Fry Springs, I'm seeing it a little bit less attractive to buyers because of the proliferation of new construction,
Yes.
Oak Hill Farm, Whittington, what Stanley Martin is doing around the community. Where I'm going with this is having the more housing options on the market is good for a supply and demand standpoint in that it allows more people to live in the urban ring or the city of Charlottesville. The potential downfall of a homeowner, though, is buyers want the nice new shiny thing and not necessarily the 1993, which quick math on the top of my head is, 26 years old. Throw that to you.
Well, I would say that's how it's supposed to work.
Okay.
So there's an economic concept called filtering.
Okay.
And it's the idea that when you build new housing, the new housing generally sells for more because people like the idea of novelty. And so the well-heeled residents who move into a city are going to snap up the new housing. And it actually alleviates the pressure on the old housing. The old housing reduces in value. And so it becomes what is called in planning lexicon naturally occurring affordable housing. It filters down to be bought by lower income groups. So what you're describing is the way it's supposed to work. That's actually a healthy real estate market that is not being hyperinflated by scarcity and is providing affordable housing for everybody. Now, to your point, if you're a homeowner, true, it's not good for you. If you're a developer or a landlord, it's probably not good for your bottom line either. But at the end of the day, I want an equitable society where there's affordable housing. So I would look at a place like San Francisco, where housing scarcity has caused the median to be something like 1.1 million. That's a bad thing. It might be good for city tax receipts, and it might be good for the existing homeowners.
But it's just creating a community of rich 1%ers, and that's it.
Exactly.
Do we think Charlottesville's on that path?
Yes. It's not quite to San Francisco levels yet, but yes, I would say that there are. I was actually going to bring this before City Council in a couple weeks. So the big thing that I learned.
You have 2 city councilors watching right now.
Good. Okay. Well, hopefully then they'll hear it twice, which is that I found there are 2 types of real estate markets in the United States. There are elastic markets and there are inelastic markets. Elastic markets allow enough housing to get built to meet demand. So they're generally approving a lot of new housing units all throughout the metro area. These are places like Houston, Dallas, and Atlanta, Phoenix, that build a lot of housing, so they have very low prices, and they have become bastions of middle class and working class growth. You have inelastic markets, such as the coastal cities like Washington, D.C., Portland, New York City, San Francisco, Seattle. They don't build enough housing to meet demand. They're inelastic. And what you see then is natural price inflation, and they become cities for
The rich.
the upper 1%, the upper 10%. I would say that Charlottesville is moving more towards that inelastic, or has been for a long time. We had a lot of revitalization and growth in the last 2 decades here in this city and in this general area, and we have not built a lot of housing to accommodate it, and so prices are increasing. We are an inelastic market.
I agree 1,000% with everything you were saying. One of the best, and I say this routinely on the show, one of the best and worst things that's ever happened to the city of Charlottesville is being named the best place to live in the country. When Charlottesville on the USA Today and the Huffington Post and on all these publications, and it happened for years, was being called the best place to live in the country, we started to getting so much attention from around the country. People were like, hey, what's going on here? Or, hey, let's sell our $950,000, 2,000 square foot home on Long Island, and where we have significant equity, and let's bring that equity and all that money to Charlottesville, where we can buy a 4,000 square foot home at half the price and still put a ton of money in the savings account. When that happened, it made Charlottesville's economy get stronger, which is a good thing.
Sure.
It made businesses like ours boom, which is a good thing. What it also did was it created a negative byproduct, and the negative byproduct was the increase of home values, the sucking up or the purchasing of the limited inventory that was on the market by outside money, by outside Charlottesville money. And then it created a place where it's just freaking expensive to live. Throw that to you.
Well, allow me to bust a myth a little bit. Okay, so everything that you said is true. We have a lot of outside investing coming in. We have a lot of outside people moving mostly from the north, it seems like, down to Charlottesville. We're on the best places to live list, so we have all kinds of effectively rich people coming in to live here and inflating the prices. However, Charlottesville does not have more of that than, say, Houston. It doesn't have more of that than, say, Atlanta or Dallas or Phoenix or Charlotte or Nashville. They have way more growth. They have way more population growth. They have way more GDP and just general capital flooding into those metro areas. They're often on the top of the list for corporate relocation, but they don't have affordable housing problems because they build a lot of new housing.
Well, they also have more land to build upon.
We have a lot of land to build upon.
Okay.
And because we have a lot of land to build upon because it's more than just Charlottesville. It's more than just the 10 square mile city.
You're talking urban ring, Albemarle County, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've contained the growth in Albemarle County to 5% of the land mass, and the other 95% is rural zoning.
And that comes back to not in my backyard. A lot of Albemarle County, and I live in Albemarle County, a lot of residents in Albemarle County are opposed to development and growth and increased housing stock in the county. Not in my backyard mindset. This mindset, I think, is slowly eroding away as millennials and folks that are our age are maturing and kind of going up the totem pole that is life, if you may.
It's a generational thing.
It's a generational thing. Yeah. I do not have that mindset. I'm a yes in my backyard type of guy. Okay.
Right.
My parents, hell no. Okay. My parents are like, I don't want that development here. I don't want those apartments here. I don't want the increased traffic. I don't want the increased population. This is going to impact my commute to here. Or maybe these renters aren't going to take care of the land as well as these homeowners will. Throw that to you.
Well, like you say, it's all about perception. I mean, I think another thing we both of us forgot to add when people are talking about the extreme demand that comes to Charlottesville, they're often blaming UVA as well. And so, hey, they bring a lot of professors and students, and they're creating all these demand problems. And again, though, I would say we are not unusual. We don't have an unusually large amount of demand in Central Virginia or even Charlottesville. There's not more demand than Miami, not more demand than Charlotte. Again, it's just about, are we going to build to the demand? And I would argue that we're not land constrained. We are zoning constrained. We have a 10 square mile city that is predominantly zoned for suburban housing. We can upzone it and allow all kinds of apartments. We have a county that is predominantly zoned for rural uses. We could rezone that and have more of any type of growth, really, but probably suburban growth. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of changing the regulations to accommodate the demand.
Ann Koss-Cowie, am I getting her last name right there?
Yes.
She's giving
Those
you
are
some
my
props
people,
right
yeah.
now. She's giving you some props. Give it a like, give it a share on any of the streams that you're watching. Christopher Eagle of Real Estate 3, welcome to the program. We got Real Estate 3, Keller Williams, Roy Wheeler Realty Company, and Long and Foster watching you right now on the program. Charlottesville's handcuffing from a zoning standpoint is potentially negatively impacting Charlottesville, but undoubtedly is positively impacting communities like Greene County and communities like Waynesboro and communities like Louisa and Zion's Crossroads. And we're seeing these ridiculously high price points in the city of Charlottesville, driving folks to the old axiom, drive till you qualify. When they get in a vehicle and they literally have to drive to Louisa,
all the way to Louisa,
or to Waynesboro, or to Greene, where they can find a price point they can afford. Throw that to you.
Yeah, one really interesting bumper sticker and sort of slogan that I'm starting to see pop up in Charlottesville that was not, I had been out of Charlottesville for a couple of years actually, traveling around the country, but one thing that I've noticed coming back is that there's a slogan, keep Virginia rural. And I kind of agree. I like the sentiment there. It seems that growth would be better served if it were going on existing infrastructure, such as what we have in Charlottesville and Albemarle, and happening in a way that doesn't require people to make 30-minute commutes into town. So, yeah, obviously places like Waynesboro and Gordonsville are helped by the growth, but to me, basically my thing is let the market work. Let people live where they want to live. If they want to live in Gordonsville, let them live there. But it seems to me that the demand pressures are more in the consumer choice, much more tends towards Charlottesville. And so we ought to be the ones accommodating the growth, not those outward counties.
Neha Soni?
Yeah,
giving you some props right now. Give it a like, give it a share. John Craig of Keller Williams, also the transportation entrepreneur and one of the co-owners of CVille Hop-On Tours. Will Vanderlyn, the owner of Yellow Cab, is watching right now. John Craig has this statement for us.
All right.
The growth of Charlottesville is constricted by Keswick millionaires and Ivy millionaires. 29 North has taken the brunt of the expansion, and it's sad that it's been built out of corporate chains. 29 South could be a potential for a mindful growth. Scott, your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, he's got it about right. In a lot of ways, just as the growth in Charlottesville has to center in very specific areas, it seems like the area around UVA, like the whole West Main area, is the only significant place that's been really rezoned in the past however many years. It's kind of the same way in Charlottesville, in Albemarle County. We have very specific areas that we can grow, and then we have most of it where we can't. So yeah, to his point, a lot of the growth just, for example, if you're a business and you want to have a retail location to open up in Albemarle County, chances are, just by percentages, you're going to have to locate on 29 North because that's the only area that's zoned for that kind of retail. And so what you get, to his point, is, in my opinion, a very untasteful and just generally like kind of a concrete mess out there, when in reality it could be spread out more and it could be...
You're talking urban sprawl.
Urban sprawl, yeah, suburban sprawl.
As opposed to strategic development.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to do, and I'm not knocking this community, the last thing I want to see is Fredericksburg and Charlottesville.
Yeah.
Northern
Virginia.
Or Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
And 29 is very reminiscent of that. In fact, I often joke on this program, I don't go north of Barracks Road. And that's a tongue-in-cheek joke, but you get what I'm saying.
Unless you have to, yeah.
You get what I'm saying. Keith Smith, who's an agent with Roy Wheeler, says, Scott, any thoughts on what Oregon has just passed, the residential infill project, aka now all single families housing can now build up to 4 units on the lot?
Great question. Yeah, they did the same thing in Minneapolis. This is called missing middle zoning, or it's known colloquially as missing middle zoning, which is effectively illegalize the idea of having single-family zoning, single-family residential zoning, and allow a rezoning up to the next increment. So on lots where you can build, where you used to be able to build one home, you can build 3, 4, or 5. I think that's going to increase the housing stock in Portland and change the physical shape of the city to reflect more of like of small apartments all throughout the city rather than the more suburban style that it has now. And I would actually advocate that we should do the exact same thing in Charlottesville. And this hasn't come up yet, but we are in the process of hiring a consultant.
$700K.
$720K.
Yeah, this is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Okay, I'm not going to steal your thunder with this here. You get the who, what. I'm going to steal a little bit
hire
of thunder.
me. I'll do it for a fraction.
Over $720,000 is being allocated to consultants to analyze and study the comprehensive plan, which is mind-boggling to me.
Yes.
Jump in here.
Yeah, I think that I was actually speaking to some planners who work in this industry, and they said that they thought it was a little much for a consultant, that it could be done probably in-house for a lot less if you were to hire, say, a new person at Neighborhood Development Services. That aside, though, I actually like that we're trying to rewrite our comp plan, which is done every 6 years in Charlottesville, and I think it's an opportunity to say, hey, look at what Portland's doing, look at what Minneapolis is doing. They rezoned much of their city, and that ought to be reflected in our comprehensive plan as well.
Why does it cost so damn much?
It's a problem in city governments around the country of hiring consultants. So any little thing that a city wants to do, another example would be a couple years ago, we tried to rewrite a certain stretch of Charlottesville to have a form-based code. That cost several $100,000.
What stretch of that? Where was that?
I want to say it was south of downtown.
Okay.
If I seem to recall. And that cost several $100,000 to hire the Form-Based Code Institute to write our plan. And then we didn't adopt it because this being Charlottesville, that's what we do. We hire consultants.
And then we don't execute on what they tell us to do.
Right. But I mean, I think to your larger point, there is a trend in municipal governance of hiring these outside consultants to do what, in my opinion, seems like very
common sense,
rudimentary work, and paying them hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a form of fiscal malpractice and abuse, and Charlottesville has not been immune to it.
For the city councilors that are watching right now, Scott Beyer, hire this man. Hire this man. He will do it for a fraction of the cost.
Exactly.
John Correct says, amen, Scott Beyer, on what you're saying right there.
Thank you, John.
Give it a like, give it a share on any of the streams that you're watching, just like Patricia Napoleon did right there.
Yes.
She's giving you Patricia Spicer Napoleon. I got to get the Spicer in there. Thank you for watching, Patricia. We have yet to discuss auxiliary dwelling units.
Yeah.
ADUs.
ADUs.
And the fact that so many folks in our community are terrified of
Are
ADUs.
Are they?
The older generation is terrified of ADUs.
That's literally the first step in YIMBY.
Right.
I mean, that's the smallest little thing.
Tell them what the acronym is.
So accessory dwelling units, it's the idea that you can have an additional unit on your plot of land.
Like a cottage.
Like a cottage or maybe a garage studio or something like that.
Or a basement apartment.
Basement apartment. I don't know if...
That doesn't count?
It might. I think that depends on the specific zoning. But,
Okay.
But yeah, that's it. And so it's not a scary thing. If anything, if you're a homeowner in Charlottesville, this actually increases the value of your property. That's what I really don't get is you can have an extra bit of income.
It's another revenue stream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can rent it out on Airbnb or something like that.
I don't get it either because I see the potential for another revenue stream, something that could potentially supplement a mortgage payment when times are lean.
Absolutely.
What is the fear? Is it that maybe these kind of nomadic renters or these nomadic Airbnb guests will not take care of the neighborhood?
Well, for one thing, ADUs don't have to be Airbnb. So I think the whole idea of having a bunch of like nomads swirling in and out of your neighborhood, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I think in a lot of cases, with all the things that we're talking about today, it really comes down to one word: parking. And people are worried that if you double the resident capacity of a given neighborhood because you're subdividing it into a bunch of ADUs. All those people are going to own their own cars and come into the neighborhood. And before long, on-street parking that used to be free and abundant and available is going to go away. So, I mean, that's a I don't really know if I would say it's a legitimate concern, but it's a concern that they have, and I can kind of understand where they're coming from.
Cars in general, I think, are going to have a dramatic impact on housing in the next 20 to 25 years. As millennials mature and continue maturing into adults, parents, and then grandparents, millennials in a lot of ways, especially younger millennials, are of the mindset that less reliance on cars, more reliance on, say, Uber, more reliance on public transportation, on the Lime scooters or the Bird scooters that are around town. I mean, if we had said 15 years ago, as parents, my 15-year-old daughter is going to leave the party at 11 o'clock at night, instead of risk her driving drunk home, she's going to get in a car with a stranger through her phone, and this stranger's going to drop my 15-year-old daughter off at home before 11 o'clock curfew. If we had said that 15, 20 years ago, we would be like, hell no, my daughter's not getting in a car with a stranger that's not marked yellow cab. But now,
it's ubiquitous.
Parents openly say, don't drive, take this Uber at 10:45, be here by 11, don't drive drunk, use Uber, and I can track where you're going on the phone.
Yeah.
Where I'm going with this is, as cars become less of a necessity in our day-to-day, how will that mindset impact housing across the country?
Well, I think actually that it's the other way around. Housing will impact the lessening of the dependence on the automobile.
Walk me through that.
So, for example, we have a developer named Oliver Kuttner who is now building a series of studio apartments right kind of in the warehouse district. And that he actually did not, the city for a while was trying to make him build more parking than he actually wanted to, but his general premise is that
micro apartments.
Yeah,
they're great.
They're great, and more to the point, they don't need parking because the people who are going to live in this kind of place aren't going to own a car. And the reason they're not going to own a car is because
live, work, play mindset.
So the more housing that we allow like that, I mean, another example, just catty corner from his project, was West 2nd. Was the West 2nd project that was going to have a structured farmers market, and unfortunately the city did not allow it.
Keith Woodard's project. Another example, however, I mean, I think it was 84 units, so you're talking about over 100 people were going to live in that building, and they were going to be within walking distance of everything they needed to do. And even if, say, they work at UVA or they work in a place where they have to drive to, the automobile trips are going to be shorter than they would be if they're living out on 29 North or in Louisa. So it's like the more housing that we can allow like this, the less dependence we are going to have on the automobile. And that's what I don't get, because a lot of people another aspect of the whole automobile thing is environmentalism, and the fact that we have automobiles emit carbons and gasoline, and so we don't want to. How about just the physical health of people walking instead of driving?
That.
And what it's going to do for quality of life and longevity of someone's body.
And the air quality.
Yeah.
And all those kinds of things. So, I don't get it, because so much of our Charlottesville political establishment says that it wants to improve the environment and, reduce some of the impacts that we have on it. Well, that's the best way to do it. Build housing in the core, and then people don't have to commute all over the place by automobile.
We're seeing a change of mindset with a lot of folks, baby boomers especially, where they're looking to live closer to urban centers, where they can walk to a restaurant or a bar and out of their apartment or condo.
Yeah.
As opposed to getting in a vehicle and driving 20 minutes or 25 minutes from their McMansion on the .75 or the 5,000 square foot home on the .5. Plot of land. How is that mindset impacting dynamics, especially in urban areas?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's we haven't really seen it fleshed out yet because the regulations haven't caught up. People do want to live in the urban areas, but the regulations prevent that sort of dense housing. Charlottesville is not an anomaly in that sense. In cities all over the country, the types of properties that Keith Woodard was trying to build densely on, you have those sort of parking lots in cities all over the country, right outside their downtown areas, and they can't redevelop those either because of the zoning. So it's like, yes, on one hand, what you're talking about is true in the sense that the market and the consumer demand is trending towards density, but the regulations have not caught up, and it's still effectively illegal to build that kind of thing all over the country.
Bellamy Brown is watching now. He's running for Charlottesville City Council.
Right.
Bellamy Brown, this is a guy that you would love. You guys should hook up. Travis Wilburn, the hospitality entrepreneur, is watching right now. Guys, give it a like and a share on any of the streams that you're watching. We're going to take the audio from this show and upload it to iTunes on the I Love CVille Show, so you can take this, put your earbuds in, and listen to this man's incredible intellect. We will put the package on ilovecville.com, so if you'd like to see the sharp and dapper Scott, you can watch him on ilovecville.com, or you can hear him on iTunes here. 10 more minutes or so. I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation. You've made the interview so easy. I love this topic in general. I would like to talk about if you, and we've touched on this, were a huge proponent or advocate of, say, West Haven or public housing, okay? A good example is Garrett Square is currently very close to being revitalized. And we're going to see single-family homes next to public housing in Garrett Square. I think anyone that has any kind of business acumen whatsoever understands that Garrett Square, from a developer standpoint or from a businessman standpoint, is maybe being underutilized because of its proximity. What is it, like a 7-iron from the downtown mall?
Yeah.
Maybe a 7-iron. Your 7-iron, probably a 5-iron from me. You hit the ball a little further than I do. Where I'm going with this is, if you're an advocate of public housing in the city of Charlottesville, are you not terrified with what's coming down the pipeline?
I can understand the fears, and it's sort of a complicated issue that I haven't been, so just full disclosure, I have not been deeply involved in the redevelopment of public housing, and I don't really have hardline opinions on it. And so I know it's a complicated issue here in Charlottesville.
But I want to see what's in your crystal ball.
Yeah, well, I mean, in an ideal sense, I would want to see that housing torn down and redeveloped at higher densities. And so the way that would work is the city would have a land sale with a private developer, and they rezone the land so that the developer can build more housing on that land than currently exists. Okay, so that's step one. Then you do one-for-one replacement so that everybody who was previously living in those units has a right to remain and live in the new building as well. But you also have you allow the developer to build a lot of market rate housing as well. So you have a mixed community of mixed income, mixed use, and that does a lot of things for a lot of different people. It generates more revenue for the city. It allows the developer to build more units, so they're making more money. You have a lot of new jobs because of the new construction. Plus, you just have a lot of new housing. You have not only the housing that the public housing residents would depend on, but you also have a lot of medium rate and high-end market rate housing all mixed together, so you have more housing overall. That's what I think they should be doing with those properties. They should not be building single-family homes on those properties.
You got a lot of comments coming in. Keith Smith,
I'm sure.
He says that he's included a link to ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units, on the stream. Click that link and you can learn more about it. Nikki Wooten-Chambliss says, loving the show. The ADUs are like a granny flat, right? It's a great option to have. My understanding is it's a state-level challenge and not a Charlottesville-specific challenge. Any insight on that, Scott?
Sorry, they said it was a state level?
State level versus Charlottesville. I think it is Charlottesville City challenge, right?
I'd have to look into the whole legal apparatus. Usually, yeah, that can be a combination. That can be a state thing or a local thing, depending on the municipality. And that's another thing, is that a whole big issue within the whole YIMBY-NIMBY vortex nowadays is, if you have all these cities that will not rezone and allow the adequate housing, should state governments jump in and sort of facilitate and do either a carrot and stick model where they try to encourage them to reform their zoning codes, or just bring the hammer down and say, no, you have to rezone your cities for more housing.
Let's really go crystal ball time.
Okay.
What does Charlottesville, Virginia, you're a smart guy, you do this for a living here. What does a Charlottesville, Virginia look like in, say, 2039, 20 years from now? 20 years from now.
Well, I know people are probably going to hate this, but I think that the presence of the massive urban agglomeration that exists in DC, Baltimore, and has spread through much of Northern Virginia, I think that will ultimately spread a little bit more into the Central Virginia area. You're already seeing places like Fredericksburg, which used to be just a little historic southern town,
sprawled,
and now it's a bedroom community for DC, and it has benefited in a lot of ways in the sense that that creates a lot of economic vibrancy. I think as transportation gets more efficient and we find new modes of transportation that can get us places faster, I think distance is a race, and you're going to see a lot more of that in Charlottesville. Basically, I don't want to say a bedroom community, but you're going to see more of a DC-Charlottesville relationship.
I think we're going to see, I'm going to spitball with you here for the sake of a show. I think we're going to see Richmond, Virginia, and the city of Charlottesville connected through Interstate 64. We're seeing Richmond spread west through Short Pump, and we're seeing Charlottesville spread east through Spring Creek. And eventually 64 is going to be a corridor of commerce and development and housing and real estate. And Richmond and Charlottesville, the lines are going to be so blurred, it's almost going to be one huge conglomerate up and down the interstate.
Yeah, I mean, well, we'll see. I mean, because right now there's a lot of rural area still between those two cities. I guess I see more interconnectivity between, I don't know, there's something more fundamentally interconnected between DC and Charlottesville to me, just because I think a lot of the Washington ecosystem is very immersed in ideas, and kind of like what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And so is a lot of UVA in Charlottesville. We're very much of an ideas community. I mean, my brother Paul founded Tom Tom Fest. Mm-hmm. That whole thing is premised on the sharing of ideas. Mm-hmm. So if a 48,000 person city can support that big of a festival that's just about ideas, that's the kind of community we are.
Is your squash game better than Paul's?
I don't play squash. I'm a hooper.
Okay, yeah. I see him grinding on the squash courts at ACAC. Bruno Shower is giving you some props right now.
All right, yeah. Hi, Bruno.
We're getting this topic. Jessica Russo of Nest Realty, welcome to the program. John Wyatt, welcome to the program. I'm getting DMs left and right here. One DM is about Fashion Square Mall. Ask the gentleman about Fashion Square Mall. I got to throw that to you here. I mean, the scuttlebutt has UVA getting in the mix. That's nothing but hearsay and rumors to this point.
Yeah.
Simon, the property owners of Fashion Square Mall, have recently converted one of their properties in Austin to a live, work, play type of lifestyle epicenter.
Is that the mall they converted into a community college in Austin?
I think I don't know that.
Okay.
I will check it out online.
Yeah.
Okay. This is where I'm going to go with this.
Okay.
Huge piece of property. Right on the urban ring.
Yeah.
Critical property. Effing ghost town right now. Uh-huh. You go into the mall, and I see less shoppers and more old folks trying to get their steps in because they could walk in an air-conditioned environment, using it for exercise and shopping, okay?
Yeah.
What the hell's going to happen to Fashion Square Mall?
Well, here's what is, in my opinion, not going to happen. It's not going to fester like that for very long. Real estate is too much of a valuable entity here in Charlottesville. I think it's going to be reconverted into new uses. It's about zoning. So I think if we were to rezone that area for, say, like mid-rise density with retail at ground level, maybe 4 or 5 stories of residential above, I think Simon would do that in a heartbeat. And matter of fact, they're already trying to do it, just down the road in Seminole Square. Great Eastern Management is trying to turn that into a mixed-use community. So I think a lot of these like big dead gray belt style areas that you see going up and down 29 North, I think if we change the zoning and change the regulation and incentives, that would be reconverted into the walkable mixed use communities of tomorrow. And obviously there's a lot that the public has to, if that were to happen, there's a lot that the public would have to do as well as far as like facilitating transit up and down that corridor. But that can be done, and it's just a matter of changing the mindset, I think.
I think Kelly Tripp, welcome to the program, the owner-operator of Smoke Kitchen and Tap, the Fitzroy, and the Rooftop Restaurant in Crozet. Thank you for joining us, Kelly. We need to get you on the program here. Amazon is gobbling up retail and brick and mortar. Uh-huh. And Amazon is the death nail to the brick and mortar storefront. Amazon now getting into the real estate space, which was just announced last week. Amazon terrifies the shit out of me. I'm going to just cut to the chase. okay, and what they can do because of their scale, their financial resources, and the fact that when you have that many eyeballs on one platform, you can put call to action messages and call to action activities in front of them, and people will respond because of their scale. Okay? How is Amazon going to impact? We already know what Amazon's going to do to brick and mortar. We know what's going to happen. What's going to happen to all these brick and mortars out there?
It does not scare me. It
Okay.
does not scare me in the sense that the real estate capacity will still find new use. Okay, it may not be retail.
What's the use going to be?
The use, kind of like what it will be with the Fashion Square Mall, it'll be some combination of housing. There is a term in real estate called experiential retail, which is the type of retail that you can't get on Amazon yet. So things like coffee shops, bars, theme parks, you name it, like putt-putt, just basically anything that you can't just, an experience that you can't just buy on retail or on Amazon.
And that's called experiential retail.
Experiential retail.
I love that term.
So I think that'll be, New York City has already seen this conversion from, like, hey, you know, you don't live in New York necessarily because you want to shop at Costco. You live there because you want an experience. And so a lot of that retail space is being converted into experiential things like microbreweries.
And maybe that's why we're seeing grocery stores like Wegmans vertically integrate their model to include restaurants, tap rooms, and experiential activities like food tastings.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense. As an owner of, did you want to add something to that?
Well, I would say that there's probably I've actually made a list of 8 or 10 different things that all this supposedly excess retail space could be converted to.
I would love to hear that list.
And I'll name a few. I mean, I think a lot of it could be like warehouse space. So for example, if you're Amazon and you need a warehouse space to store all your goods before you deliver them, you might actually buy some of that property. I think that's why they want to get involved in real estate, because I think that's what one of their uses is going to be.
So they want to further vertically integrate their model by owning the warehouses where they can make the drop shipments more efficient and maybe shorter.
You're seeing that in China as well with Alibaba. They're buying a lot of the old corner store space, and they're putting their products that they sell in that space to either display so that people can then go in, look at the product, and order it on Alibaba.
Fascinating.
Or, basically storage, so they can just ship it from there. They have a shorter place to ship it.
That's fascinating. So it's a showroom.
Yes.
It's not a point of sale.
That's one of my 10 things.
Is showrooms.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is freaking fascinating. I own the lion's share of this building. I have 24 tenants in here. On the first, second floor, as the owner of the Macklin, should I be terrified that I'm in this space? Office space ownership moving forward.
Yeah, I don't know. Office space is kind of that's sort of a
nebulous,
dangerous thing right now too.
Okay.
But I mean, ultimately, I don't think physical real estate space will not go out of style, because our population is growing and people still need buildings to live and do whatever they want to do in. So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it will be converted into housing, because once the zoning changes, because we have a glut of retail space as of now, and we have a shortage of housing. So anyone who can put 2 and 2 together, if you're working in city government, you should know, well, hey, maybe we should rezone so that to change the use of the property.
I love it. I love it. You're getting props. Let's get some of the props that is out there right now. Buck Morris says Scott Beyer is the man.
Love Buck, yeah.
Buck is giving you some props right now. Bruno Showers is just loving what's happening right now. Keith Smith, the realtor, is saying, great conversation, gentlemen. Barbara Lundgren, thank you kindly for joining us. You have made my day better. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Market Urbanism Report. How can all the viewers get touched by your brand even further?
Go to marketurbanismreport.com, and there you'll see our blog. We're also active on a Facebook group, a Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter. And we have a podcast, which is available across multiple podcast networks.
Why do you like the group better than the page?
It gets more engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's more of a family. It's like all these people who are shouting out right now. This is sort of like my digital family. And
it's like the water cooler, if you may.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's much more personal than Facebook page, which is kind of like those are more like branding pages.
Love it. I love it. I love it. I found everything about this intriguing. We're going to archive the show in totality on ilovecville.com. On ilovecville.com, you can watch Scott and me interact and talk about Charlottesville, Albemarle County, Central Virginia from a micro and macro standpoint, national trends and how they pertain to our community. We will also take the audio from today's show, upload it to iTunes. We do a daily podcast on iTunes. So if you want to put your earbuds in and walk around with this and listen to us, or stream it in your car or your vehicle when you're driving around town, you're able to do that as well. We're trying to make the content approachable and accessible, and just throw it out there so you can take what you want from the conversation and further educate yourself. That's the whole concept of what we're doing at I Love CVille. We're trying to feature the best of Charlottesville, Virginia, and I think you saw today, after 66 minutes, that Scott Beyer absolutely epitomizes the best of Charlottesville, Virginia. We close the program the same way every single time, and we ask folks to embody the golden rule. We make this about treating others how you want to be treated yourself. I don't talk religion. I just talk respect and treating others how you want to be treated yourself. Charlottesville needs that more than ever. Our country needs the golden rule more than ever. My name is Jerry Miller. Tomorrow, another media entrepreneur, this one in the sports space, Ahmad Hawkins, will join us, a University of Virginia football player and graduate who is now creating a ton of content from a sports standpoint on social, online, and across a lot of different platforms. We're going to pick his brain not only about his business, but also what it's like to be an African-American entrepreneur in 2019 in the city of Charlottesville, Virginia. On Wednesday, Elliot Harding, who's running for state senate, he's going to join us. He's challenging Cree Deeds. That is definitely a tough road ahead, but if someone can do it, it's Elliot Harding. On Thursday, Frank Bailiff of Southern Development and John Kerber of Dominion Custom Homes will join us. Southern Development has developed a ton of neighborhoods in the Charlottesville community. John Kerber is doing it off Polo Grounds Road with the Prophet Ridge community. And on Friday, we have live music on the I Love CVille show. Enjoy your afternoon, guys.
Thank you, man. This is a great show.
It was so fun. It was a pleasure.